Yeah, g'day. Thanks for coming to check out our new resources for the IB Psychology course. I could explain everything in print, and I will, but I know everyone's pushed for time. We're all busy teachers, so I thought it might just be easier to jump in front of the camera here and just explain the new concept, the new textbook, and all the resources that we're going to have available. So if you've got 10 minutes, I'll just talk you through what we're going to offer and how this new textbook is going to be a little different to the other excellent options that you'll also have available. So now that the new guide has finally been published, a lot of teachers are asking on the OCC and the Facebook groups, are there going to be new textbooks available and study guides available for the new course? The short answer is yes. There's going to be a plethora of excellent resources available to support your teaching of the new IB Psychology course. I know those clever guys over at Pearson, Alan, Christos and Christian, they're going to be working on a book. Jeannie Jameson has been kind enough to release some excellent samples from her book through the groups. We've got the digital resource at Cognity. I don't quite know how it works, but that seems like a pretty good option for like the modern tech age. For digital, the lovely Laura Swash at Tutor to You is writing one for the digital a digital course. John Crane is working on one for the digital textbook for the In Thinking site, I believe. Who else? Hodder presumably will be writing another one. And OUP's got a good bunch of guys working on their textbook as well. I originally signed on to write with OUP just quickly, but as I sat down to write the biological approach, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I couldn't bring myself to write a textbook that goes in that structure. Nothing against the structure, it makes for excellent reference. But as you'll see, our Themantic approach is slightly different, and we think just is going to facilitate a far better understanding of the course for students. So there's going to be excellent resources that are going to be available for the teaching of the IB Psychology course, but ours is going to be a little bit different. So how are our resources different? Basically, in a nutshell, what we do in our textbook is we take the options in the core and we combine them. And in fact, we take the three approaches, biological, cognitive, social, cultural, and we merge those two and we teach them at the same time as we teach the options. Quite frankly, with our options being reduced to 20 hours and the amount of content required in those options, this is just, to me, it just makes sense to teach it this way. Also, I find that in the past when I've taught the different levels of analysis or the different approaches, to focus on just biological variables and behavior, it kind of encourages reductionism. Whereas if we merge the three, now we can look at a behavior like prejudice discrimination. Well, we can look at it from a biological angle, from a cognitive angle, from a socio-cultural angle. That hits learning outcomes for the options. It hits the outcomes for the approaches, and it also develops in students a deeper understanding of psychology, which ultimately is our goal. The current design is supposed to be that, we teach the biological, cognitive, socio-cultural, and then students will apply that in inquiry-based in the options. Frankly, we don't have the time for that to work. It would be lovely if it worked, but, in designing a curriculum that might make sense, but in the practical application, we just see, as I'm sure you know, with the time restraints we have, it's just not applicable that way. So what our resource does is we take four core units: criminology, social influence, love and marriage, and PTSD, and it merges biological, cognitive, social, cultural with the two options: human relationships and abnormal psychology. As I was designing this textbook, I realized that this is going to get a little bit messy very easily if I'm not too careful. So what I still had to do was separate it into topics. So we've got one big core unit, for example, social influence, but I had to break that down into individual topics. So you're still teaching things like stereotypes, social identity theory, prejudice and discrimination, cooperation and competition, origins of conflict, conflict resolution, enculturation, acculturation, cultural influence. So all these topics are still in there, and they're still divided by topics. So if you like, you can dip in and out like you would a regular textbook. You can rearrange the order if the order doesn't make sense for you, or if you'd prefer to teach in a different order. Hopefully in the sample chapters that we release, you'll be able to see how it works. For example, if we try and explain the brain and behavior, so we say, well, maybe particular damage to the frontal lobe might affect aggression or impulsive behavior. Sure, okay, so we begin with saying the brain affects behavior. That's quite a limited view of understanding how the brain affects behavior. So our next topic, we just throw another step in there. The brain can affect our thinking and decision-making, processing. this hits the options, this hits the content for the cognitive level, the cognitive approach. So now students not only understand the cognitive approach and it's being taught in context of thinking and decision making, they also get a deeper understanding of a behavior like impulsive behavior or antisocial behavior, criminal behavior. So now we look at, okay, damage to the frontal lobe can affect thinking and decision making, which could affect impulsive behavior. So we get a better alignment there. Let me give you a pretty good example of how I think you just have to teach the core and the options together in this current syllabus. When we get to human relationships, if you teach that option, you've got prejudice, discrimination, conflict, competition in the group dynamics. In the socio-cultural approach, you've got social identity theory and stereotypes. The social identity theory was devised to explain group dynamics, intergroup behavior. So if you teach it in isolation, out of context, in a socio-cultural approach unit, you really have to come back to all those same ideas when you get to the human relationships unit. So just personally, to me, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to compartmentalize those, to separate those in the course. Moreover, I just feel like that runs the risk of doubling up on content. You know, you're going to teach the same ideas, perhaps even the same studies that you would teach in socio-cultural when you get to human relationships. You just merge the two. So now you teach social identity theory, minimal group designs, and minimal group paradigms, and more recent research that looks at intergroup discrimination to explain origins of prejudice, discrimination, and you just combine the two. To me, that's a bit of a no-brainer. Just very briefly, I just want to talk about how each section is structured by a lesson. Each section of the textbook, so you've got a topic, right, say prejudice, discrimination, and then you've got a section within that, biological origins of prejudice. So that's that section, biological origins of prejudice, and you can see all the topics and sections in the draft contents page. That is one lesson's worth of material, approximately. You've got a guiding question there, and the guiding question is essentially your learning outcome for that lesson, if you want it to be. Of course, you can change it, amend it, adapt it if you like, but the guiding question there is just simply trying to get students to understand or to know two things and be able to see how they relate. If they can answer that guiding question, they have an understanding of how two things relate, then this is going to be valuable for the next lesson. And this snowballs over time. In a nutshell, that's the Themantic approach. For new teachers to the IB Psychology course, and especially with this new syllabus, the book has been structured in a way, so if you wanted to, you could start on page 1, the introduction, topic 1.1, lesson A, and work all the way to unit 10, topic 9.9, lesson D. And you can go through that. Each section, each topic has been divided into subsections. Each section is about one lesson's worth of content. I know because I've tried it on my own students at the moment, because I currently teach in this fashion. So for new teachers and with this new course, if you liked, you can have your whole first semester already planned. You've got every lesson there. You've got about 40 to 45 lessons worth of criminology in the introduction. Open the book and work your way through. For experienced teachers, you know, I know that you won't want to be constricted like that, so you want to go in and out, dip it out, put your own input, use your own resources when you can. The text absolutely supports that. Because it's been divided by topics, you know, you can chop and change, rearrange, just like any ordinary textbook. So while the structure there has been deliberately designed to facilitate an A to B structure of the course, so we can enhance deep understanding, it also allows experienced teachers to chop in and out and to rearrange it and to use it like you would any other textbook. Another positive to this approach that I've found in my own practice is that by combining the core with the options and teaching to concepts, you're giving students a much broader range of possible ways to answer exam questions. Let's say, for example, you're like me in the old days and started with localization of brain function. Well, you'd explain to students, you know, they would learn what that concept is, and they would learn a study that demonstrates that. So in their brain, they would think, right, that study is shown for localization of brain function. But then throughout the rest of the course, I would find myself teaching loads of other studies that would also demonstrate localization of brain function. When it got to a revision time, students would have it in their mind that that study they did in the first week in year 1 was the localization of brain function study. So now the exam is not a summative assessment of their deeper understanding of psychology. If that question comes up in an exam, they're being assessed on what they did in week 1. They're being assessed, what they did, whereas if we just teach a range of different studies to demonstrate other concepts and relationships in the course, when it comes to revision time, students go, right, what does localization of brain function mean? Now they've got 5, 6, 7 different studies that they can choose from. They know the concept, different parts of the brain have different functions. They could say, right, well that study we looked at PTSD, does that show this? Yeah, it does, great, use that in the exam. So now you give students more opportunities to demonstrate their understanding from throughout the course, not just in different particular topics. Another example would be for hormones. Yeah, we look at hormones in origins of attraction or the formation of relationships. And so already then you can see how that reduces the content. You don't teach hormones separately in the biological approach. You might talk about melatonin and seasonal affective disorder, but then teach hormones again for origins of attraction. Just cut out the melatonin and seasonal affective disorder, just teach hormones with origins of attraction. But if that didn't make sense, well then talk about the role of cortisol and PTSD in a completely different option. So now you've given students 2 choices. They can use that same learning in the paper 1, or they can use it in paper 2. And yeah, you're hitting more outcomes with less content, which really this is what we need to do in this current course. We need to find as many ways as we can to reduce content and deepen understanding. I currently teach in an international school in Yokohama, Japan, and like you, I'm sure, I have a range of students. I have students, native English speakers, really fluent literacy levels, reading comprehension. They can read and grasp concepts very easily. I have students who are English as a second language. They're still acquiring the language. So of course, the time for them to acquire and consolidate all the new terms and ideas that we're teaching takes a little bit more time. So I've had to construct a text that tries to address that wide range of students that we all have in our classrooms. I've tried to make the language as accessible for students as possible, so they can read and understand it. I've tried to write it in a personal tone, so it's like a personal voice. It's my voice talking to the student. I want it to be like a second voice in the room, helping you explain the concepts. Or if a student is reading the book at home, it's like a teacher voice explaining it to them. The other advantage of using the textbook and having it designed by topic is, if you're a fan of the flipped classroom, this works ideally. Each section is about 700 to 900 words. I timed it in my own research. That takes anywhere from 4 minutes to 15 minutes for students to read. If you like the flipped classroom, you can assign homework, you can assign that reading, so when they come to the lesson the next day, they've already done it. They've already done the reading, so and you know that it's going to take about 4 to 15 minutes. So it's not going to be burdensome, cumbersome for many students.